Welcome, fans of the Justice League universe. My name is Sam.
My name is Sydney.
And we are two members of the JLUpodcast team who enjoy analyzing the DC films from Warner Brothers Studios. Other contributors to this episode are Alessandro Maniscalco and Rebecca Johnson.
You can find us individually on Twitter, and you can follow the show at JLUpodcast.
In this episode, we continue in the final battle between Wonder Woman and Ares, and we will talk about Steve Trevor's ultimate sacrifice. But before we get into that scene, or actually scenes, we're calling this scenes 48 and 49 because we do have Steve's sacrifice and then we have the big ending with Diana rising to the occasion. But before that, we want to make a quick announcement. As you can tell, we're getting close to the end of our Wonder Woman scene-by-scene analysis. So we want to have a special episode to mark the occasion. And back at BVS, we did a special episode where we had submissions from all over the world, actually, about why we love Batman v Superman. And this time we want to hear from you, our listeners, about your favorite part of Wonder Woman. It could be a favorite scene or a favorite character, a favorite thematic thread, or something in the music or the production design. Whatever specific part of Wonder Woman really stands out to you, just tell us about it. Why was it meaningful? What really stood out to you? You can be part of that special episode by sending us an email. You can send text, and we'll read that in the episode. Or what we would like even better is we could hear your voice if you sent an audio file. You can submit the text or the audio file to us at JLUpodcast@gmail.com. And we are asking for those by September 10th so we can compile the episode together. That's JLUpodcast@gmail.com. And if you're going to, record an audio file, aim for something that's like less than 3 minutes, just to help us put it all together. But Sydney, you were actually someone who submitted to our BVS special episode.
Yes.
What was it that led to you to want to contribute to that episode back there?
Well, for Batman v Superman, I think in contrast to Wonder Woman, while there were fans that really loved it, it wasn't as universally praised, by the mainstream audience. And, I loved that movie a lot. And there were so many things about it that were very meaningful to me. So I just wanted to contribute to that and get my opinion out there in some way. I think I'd have to go back and listen to that again. I think I talked a lot about Batman.
And Bruce, I remember it was Bruce Wayne. Yep.
Yeah. I forgot if there was another thing where I mentioned Wonder Woman, though, too. I think I may have mentioned something about one of the scenes we're about to discuss.
Mm-hmm. And you're right about BVS. Like, part of why we wanted to do that episode as why we love Batman v Superman was just to tell people, hey, there are those of us who love Batman v Superman. In this one, people kind of take it for granted that Wonder Woman is a popular film and lots of people love it. Mm-hmm. So we thought we'd take a little bit different angle and say, like, okay, a lot of people love this Wonder Woman film. That's great. So let's go at what's your favorite part of the film, So it's it's definitely a different kind of context for this film versus BVS.
Right.
But let's go ahead and get into it here with the big final battle and getting to the real kind of conclusion of the film. So first of all, overall, we've talked about in our analysis that in a lot of ways this film is well written, but it is kind of largely written by the book, and specifically the book being Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. It's like a book about the structure of blockbuster movies. If you want to write a big hit movie, you need to do these sorts of things.
Right.
It's literally a book people can pick up and read, and you'll start to notice that a lot of blockbuster movies follow the prescription of that book. This is one of them that, not entirely, but a lot of parts of it follow that formula. And this would be called the all is lost moment. It looks like our hero is going to lose. It looks like the villain is going to be triumphant. All of the different characters are all in desperate situations. The Oddfellows
How will they make it out of this one?
Yeah, exactly. There's no way this is going to work out. The Oddfellows have ran out of bullets and they're pinned down, and Wonder Woman is literally trapped on the ground. So this is the all is lost moment. And then by the end of what we're going to talk about here in this episode, the hero does find a way to break through and still save the day.
Right, of course. And it's a familiar formula, but I think that's part of what made this movie really accessible to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And, in that way, I'm kind of glad it did, because it's a wonderful movie. It does the formula well. And, if that got more people to go see it, to really fall in love with it, then, I guess that's positive overall.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with you that it does the formula well. Like, just because you follow the formula doesn't mean it's a bad movie. You can do it well, or you can do it poorly, or you can phone it in. This one was not phoning it in. This one was doing it well. In this scene, where I think it does it well is that the way Wonder Woman is able to break free and win the day is because of threads that have been tied through the whole movie. So she is going to choose love. She is going to say, I have noticed things about mankind. I have learned about mankind, and I am going to choose to still save them. That is actually, an arc for the movie overall. A movie that follows the formula poorly would have a climax or, would have a final moment where it's just something clever that they do or something that flies in from the side, and then that's how they're able to save the day.
Right, but here they built up to it.
Exactly, and it pays off things that had been built from the start, yeah.
Right.
So let's go into the scene. It starts with Diana wrapped in treads from, a tank that was nearby and being crushed kind of into the pavement. And this is really an homage to the Wonder Woman character, who has a long history of bondage. A lot of the early comics would always have Wonder Woman tied up at some point, in the story.
Right. I think it's, what is it? Probably like Wonder Woman and Nightwing got to be the two DC characters that do this the most.
Yeah, so to me this is tastefully done, at least.
Yeah, it's not ropes or chains. It's a little bit more... what would you call it? Contextual, I guess.
Yeah. And it covers her more appropriately than, yeah. I mean, that is kind of a nod to the character, so at least they're not trying to, ignore that history. They've just found a more tasteful way of incorporating it into the story.
Right. And, it kind of, I didn't even really think of it that way until you said it, so it kind of goes right under the radar, too.
Then they do a good job, I think, of directing the audience towards Steve in the sky, because we see from Diana's perspective her looking up towards him and seeing the plane in the distance, and then we cut into the plane where we can see Steve. So that's a nice way to just edit and direct the audience right to where we need to go next.
Yeah, it's kind of, she was in the middle of this battle, but now everything is suddenly focused on, oh no, wait, Steve is about to die.
Yeah. And we get the close-ups after they do that nice transition to put us up in the sky with Steve in the plane. They do the matching close-ups, like a close-up on Diana and then a close-up on Steve, because we're coming to this big moment, so we really want to be there with the characters and see them, in detail.
Yeah, and a specific shout out to Chris Pine in this scene, because every single emotion, I think, passes over his face in just a few moments here when he's contemplating his death. He looks scared, and then he kind of calms himself for a while. You can kind of see his eyes even clear. And then, the little smile even when he's thinking of Diana, I imagine, and how she's going to, carry on after him. Yeah,
and even before that, the emotional range started with him laughing in joy because he saw that the other Oddfellows were able to destroy the warehouse, of the poisons and the gas and stuff. So he gets to be happy, like, hey, this mission was successful. Like, ever since I found out about what Dr. Poison's doing, I have been trying to find a way to stop and to destroy these poisons and this gas. And he gets to have that joy of, he gets to see with his own eyes, we did it. We actually succeeded. So he's laughing and is joyful. And then he goes through everything that you described. So it really is a full range and a performance that he does without any lines, but just, on his face.
Right. And it's a victory for him, and it's a good conclusion to his arc because, since we first met him back on, Themyscira, he's mostly been kind of cynical about, the war and what he can do. And to see him, laughing like, oh my gosh, it actually worked. We're going to win the day.
Yeah, and even some technical stuff like the camera work is good, like how they have the camera tilted so that it really does feel like he's going up and up and up away from danger. And then they show us the rows and the stacks of the bombs. So it's also just, again, very clear to the audience what's at stake, what's about to happen, and why it's important. He's not dying for nothing. We can clearly see that he is sacrificing himself for this cause. So it's also just, it's good acting, but it's also just very sound filmmaking.
And the music is beautiful too, and you can hear it definitely changes immediately to something more dramatic once the plane actually explodes.
And I think it was just a great call to let the camera linger on Steve Trevor for longer than you had to, right? You could have just gone to 3 seconds of a close-up and then go to the explosion. They gave many seconds to really let this sink into the audience and let the music swell and everything to roll over. And it just marks it as a very important moment, and it lets all of those emotions flow from the actor and the music to the audience.
Yeah, true. It's not just like, okay, this happens and, oh, look, he made his brave sacrifice. You feel it because, yeah, you're right. They give you time to go through all those emotions with Steve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know that takes some courage for the filmmakers to really let that draw out, because it would be easier to just say like, hey, that can be tighter. Let's trim 5 seconds out of there. It's like, no, we really needed every one of those seconds to get as much out of this as we could.
Mm-hmm. And for this film especially, I feel like the emotion is probably one of the most important parts. So, it's really essential that they did that.
Mm-hmm.
That they didn't try to cut it out or skip on the emotional impact of the moment.
Yeah. And then again, good flowing of the editing, because we have the explosion, which we see from Diana's perspective, because again, this whole movie basically has been very consistent in taking Diana's point of view. And we see the explosion, and then we go to Diana's reaction. She screams, she yells no, and we feel that with her as well.
Mm-hmm. And then she enters God mode.
Yeah, so then that's how she
Literally?
Yes, and that is how she gets out of the bondage. And it's really filmed like God mode too, with the light below her and her up in the sky and like flexing.
Yeah.
But this next portion of the scene is, to me, in my mind, I kind of call this like the Diana's rage portion of the scene, because she's basically just completely upset and she's seeing red, so she's just going to be like mowing down Germans left and right. That sets up a nice contrast, because we're going to go through her rage here, which we'll talk about some more, but that's to set up the fact that she's going to have this serene kind of choice on the side of love at the end. But the reason that love part feels really strong and effective is because we go through the rage first, so it kind of sets up the contrast.
Yeah, it's her initial and instinctual reaction to the trauma of seeing the man she loves die, to be killed. So, obviously anyone would react in that situation with incredible grief or rage. And, she's got a bunch of men with guns who are convenient targets for that rage right now.
Yeah, so she can take it out on the people around. I like, too, some of the filming, like they have the camera go forward, and that reminds me of BVS, how she would like leap forward towards Doomsday. So giving some real kinetic energy to her when she is in full combat mode.
Yeah, and it kind of feels like it's meant to give the effect of, I guess, super speed, which I don't think is... You're right, we've seen her do that in Batman v Superman, and she also does it in Justice League, but I don't think she had done it too much in this film up to this point.
No, I think this is the first time that we've seen it like this kind of motion from her.
Right.
I mean, she slid around and she had some really good choreography in some of the fight scenes, but the way that this is filmed, kind of stylized, it seems like she's tapping into an extra sort of power that she wasn't before.
Right, and she's doing that a lot, or she'll continue to do that as the fight goes on, sort of tapping into new powers. So you really see how she's grown in power since the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah, and I like that idea, too, that through these really strong, poignant emotions, she can actually get bigger stronger physical powers from it. And I like that she can get powers from rage, but she can also get powers from love. And it's kind of her choice which one she wants to go with. It's not like she's a hero she's not like a Red Lantern where she only gets the power from rage. She can actually get power from a lot of different kinds of emotions, and so it's really up to her what she's going to do.
Right. So it's, emotional moments sort of trigger these changes in her.
We also, by the way, just really quick, we get one more like bracelet blast or block, so we've had that throughout the movie, and we get one more of those kind of coming right across her face, blocking the bullet. So that is a nice little, iconic Wonder Woman kind of move.
Another thing I noticed in this scene is probably more than any other shots during this whole scene at the airfield, you get this, bright orange color scheme.
Oh, yeah, lots of fire around.
It featured a lot in the marketing, and there's also, several slow motion shots where, she just looks angry and she's surrounded by, soldiers going all over the place, and there's kicked up dust around, and it looks a lot like the gas attack on Veld, which was a big part of the marketing. A lot of it was this very dusty, orange and golds. And this is a huge traumatic moment for her. And they're using, I guess, the more iconic color scheme for the film really heavily in this. And it just kind of reminds you of the traumatic events that she also encountered in Veld.
Yeah, that's a great point. And this is also, all of this stuff is what we were saying about how you're paying off things from before, or you built up to this moment, so it makes it more effective. That's the color palette that's chosen and all that kind of stuff. Similar motions before, like we've seen her block bullets like that before, so when we see it here, now it has, that additional meaning. Another one that I think is a setup from before that makes this pay off really well is Diana's mother said to her, the idea that great love can turn to great sorrow.
Oh, yes.
Like, Hippolyta was saying it about Diana, like, you were my greatest love and now my greatest sorrow, or I think maybe was the line. But that idea was set up, and now that connects to this all is lost moment, because Diana had kindled a love with Steve, but losing Steve means that her love could turn into sorrow. And so now we're seeing, there's this danger to having love, because if you lose it, it could make you very upset, very full of rage, angry at the world. But Diana's going to luckily kind of reclaim it by the end. But, to me, it makes all of this, like you said, connect back to stuff that had been built up before.
And, traumatic moments or emotional moments triggering, developments in her powers. I mean, we're going to get a lot more into this once we get to the, I believe in love part. But it's funny that you mentioned red lanterns earlier, because, this whole, I think, emotions turning into power. I mean, there's precedence for that in the DC universe. That's the entire concept of Green Lanterns. And love is also a powerful emotion, with the star sapphires. And, bit of trivia, Diana even briefly becomes a star sapphire during the Blackest Night arc of Green Lantern. So, we're going to get into it, how a lot of people think that maybe Diana's powers, her talking about love is maybe a bit cheesy. But first of all, I mean, there's precedence in the DC universe, emotions are power, and it's, I don't know. I mean, there's several cool things about it. We'll talk about it more when we get closer to that scene.
Before we get too far into it, too, I did want to bring up another connection. So, we've mentioned some connections to earlier in this movie. There's also some connections to Batman v Superman. Because here we had Diana, Wonder Woman, losing Steve Trevor. And in the prior movie, BVS, or, a couple movies before, but the prior one that had Diana in it, we had Lois Lane losing Superman, Clark Kent. And so it's actually kind of nice. We noticed it when we were prepping our notes for the scene, like right after seeing the movie, but other people have noticed it as well. Scott Stamper on Twitter, he pointed out that the fact that Diana lost Steve in a sacrifice like this means that in BVS, when she sees Lois Lane and sees Superman on the ground, she can really empathize and sympathize with that sort of feeling, with that moment. So now when we go and rewatch BVS, the look between Diana to Lois at the death of Superman actually has more layers of meaning once we see Wonder Woman.
And I think that was something that a lot of fans even thought of way before Wonder Woman came out, just from BVS. We all knew that Steve was going to be in this film, and it was satisfying to kind of see that theory confirmed, I guess, that that was, Diana's empathy for Lois in that scene. She's witnessing this kind of sacrifice again, and it reminds her of her goals and who she is too. Because that was her moment where she was sort of stepping back onto the scene after being absent for decades.
So, all right, so we go, let's get back into the rage-filled stuff. There's the fighting that we talked about, the orange color palette. It leads up to this scene where a shot where it's straight on Wonder Woman, and then she punches her arms out to the side, and then a whole bunch of Germans kind of fly back in slow motion.
Yeah, that was it, and the dust gets kicked up.
Yeah, so that's one where she's doing a lot of stuff, but they really let that one linger. And again, it's not about the fight choreography. it's about the emotion that she is feeling right now, and the filmmakers know that. They know this is not a time to do fancy fight choreography and all this stuff. That was earlier. This is a time where we just soak up what she is going through right now.
Yeah, and the look of the kind of look of mustard gas of the scene, really ties in with everything we've seen before.
It's interesting too that so that shot when she has her arms out and is screaming in rage, they cut right from that to Ares, and Ares has his arms out at his side. Mm-hmm. So this is basically like they're mirroring each other's body language to indicate that Wonder Woman is in danger of joining Ares' side. Like if she follows this rage path, she is basically becoming Ares.
Yeah, and he looks really pleased with this too.
Yeah, he's thinking, okay, I might be, getting her, I might be able to play on this and get her over to my side, or at least to, even if she doesn't join him as a partner, she might stay raged and angry at mankind and just at the world, and that would be just fine with Ares, I think. But I like it that the filmmakers, they literally cut right from Wonder Woman to Ares in the same body position to show that they're kind of getting on the same page if Diana's not careful. Right.
He villain monologues here.
Yeah, look at this world. Mankind did this, not me. So he's always trying to say, I'm not doing this. It's really mankind. To me, he's really trying to make mankind out to be the worst thing ever, right? Like mankind has ruined this world. Look how horrible they are. And he's trying to direct Diana's rage towards mankind. That's his intention, at least, I think.
Yeah, and his monologuing gets cut off because, she's not really thinking of it as becoming like him. She's just mad at everything right now. So he gets cut off with a kick to the head.
Yeah. And I think he made a strategic mistake, because if he is trying to convince Diana to join his side, he said something like, Colonel Trevor is also part of the problem here with mankind, and Colonel Trevor left you with nothing. I think that was a mistake. If he would have played the part like Steve Trevor is a good guy, but mankind was horrible and they took him from you, then he might have made more progress. But he tried to also throw Colonel Trevor in, and you should also be mad at Steve Trevor because he left you with nothing. I'm like, that tactic is probably not going to work.
Right.
But I think you're right. She's not really thinking about any of it rationally. She is just reacting right now.
Yeah. But also, it wasn't a good strategic move on his part, but it also, I think, illustrates the differences between him and Diana, because her rage here and her grief is because Steve died, so it really is grief. It's a uncontrollable anger towards everything right now because she is upset that he died. Yeah. It's not like Ares, where he just has a specific concentrated hatred towards humans in general. Mm-hmm. She's just mad at everything right now, but she doesn't have his worldview.
Right, I agree. So you're right. She takes him down. She gets a couple punches in. Then he sends her flying back. So we're going to get a little bit more of the fight between them. But then Ares tries to bring another card onto the table here, trying to play his hand. He whips over a Dr. Poison, and she rolls into the scene on the ground. So he's thinking maybe this is a tact I can use with Diana. I think he's kind of realizing she has this anger, but she still was kind of directing it at me. She was punching me in the face. Let me try to give her something else to direct her anger at. So let me throw Dr. Poison out here.
Yeah, here's this woman who created these toxins that, killed the people in Veld. She's helped the war. She's helped the war continue. So, and yeah, it kind of works for a minute because, Diana raises the tank and looks like she's about to crush her. But it's another situation where Ares, maybe took the wrong tactic, because he's trying to hold up Dr. Maru as this example of all the ugliness that humans have. And, when Diana looks at her deep, even through her rage, even through her grief, she still has empathy. I think looking at Dr. Maru's scarred face here reminds her that there's more to humans than just what Ares says. I think she feels more sympathy with Dr. Maru rather than just the ugliness.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And again, this is why this works, because the movie set things up and they pay off here. We had Dr. Maru, and she had this partial mask on her face. Mm-hmm. So that's like Chekhov's mask. If you show that mask, you're going to have to take it off at some point, right? The audience wants to know what's underneath that mask. And because we're watching a movie, we know that we're going to see it at some point. And this is a great time to show it, right? Like Ares wants to reveal the full, what he sees as ugliness of mankind. So he blows that mask off, right, and exposes her. And he thinks this is gruesome. She's a horrible person. She's done horrible things. And look at her. Of course you should be like totally disgusted with this.
Yeah, it's reflected on her face even.
Right. Ares thinks so. But then, so that's a great payoff with the mask for Dr. Maru. But it's also a payoff for what we've talked about a lot on this podcast, which is really Diana's superpower is her empathy. She has strong empathetic skills. She sees people, she connects with them, she feels their pain, she wants to help them out. She can do it immediately, she can do it very deeply. And so, like you were saying, yeah, there's still, underneath Diana's current anger, there's still that empathetic person who is always there for Diana. And so she can still look at Dr. Maru and think, I don't have pure hatred for you. Even the things you've done, I still am going to make a different choice.
Mm-hmm. And it's nice that she has that empathy, too, because I guess one thematic trope that goes back centuries, and I've seen some criticism for it in this movie, is, you know, evil people are portrayed as, like, ugly. Like disfigurations or scars are portrayed as, like, a reflection of someone's impurity or evil. And, you know, in real life, that's kind of insensitive because, you know, just because
there's no correlation actually.
Yeah, there's no correlation. But, you know, so I do like here that Ares tries to use it as, you know, a almost physical representation for why Dr. Maru and humankind in general are, you know, ugly and evil, but Diana doesn't see that.
Right. So, yeah, it is kind of going into that trope, but Diana rejects it. So then, in a sense, that's also the film almost kind of commenting on that trope.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't actually know yet that Diana's going to make that choice, because at first, this is the moment of truth, basically. Right now, Diana has to make the choice. She pulls the tank like over her head, and she could smash it down on Dr. Poison, or she might not. And again, this is why I think the film does a good job, right? Because an inferior film would just have Diana lift it up, think about it, and then decide to do the right thing and say, like, no, I choose love instead. But this film did a better job because they said, let's actually insert something meaningful and important for the character of Diana, Wonder Woman, and let's have that connect to how she makes her choice. And they also came up with a really clever way of having it happen in this moment. Because Steve has his final, you know, dialogue with Diana several minutes ago, but they came up with a clever way to have it actually like come to the surface right now by having the whole bomb explosion and Diana can't quite hear him, can't make out what he's saying. I thought that was just a really clever way to have it all come to a head right here at this moment when she's holding the tank. Right.
And, you know, it's a very emotional scene as well. We get, you know, his line, I wish we had more time. You know, that this has been a repeating thing throughout the story ever since he first introduced the watch back on Themyscira. And, you know, she doesn't understand why people let such an object dictate their lives. But, you know, now she sees what it's all about. There was a feeling that, you know, maybe their relationship would have gone on, that they would have been able to, you know, experience what people do when the fighting stops. But, you know, for it to suddenly come to an end like this, you suddenly realize the value of the short time that you had.
Well said, and I think it works really well here. And we also just get the very simple statement from Steve of I love you, which is also just nice to have, that he was able to say that and she was able to hear it before the end of the movie. So I thought that was nice too.
It's not nice, it's sad. You only hear it right at the end.
Yeah, that's true. She hears it when he's already gone. I mean, it is sad, but it is nice that he was able to say it, right?
Right, and it is. And you're right, happening at that exact moment, it kind of reminds her of what they had and who she is. And, you know, it brings her out of her mindless rage, sort of back into herself again.
And it gives her the answer she needs, which is that idea of love, right? So he inserted love, and then she can take love and use that to defeat Ares. Before we get into the love kind of finish here, I also want to mention another piece of Ares' dialogue when he's trying to, push Diana over the edge. He says that these people do not deserve your protection. So he taps into that key word that we've talked about a lot of deserve. Mm-hmm. So again, it's yet another instance of how this climactic scene is tying up to things that have been laid all the way along. We've heard Hippolyta talk about what men deserve. We've heard the Oddfellows talk about what they deserve. We've heard Diana talk about what they deserve. And now Ares is even saying that they don't deserve your protection. Mm-hmm. And then Diana's going to bring it around to it's not about deserve, it's what you believe. So it's all set up and built up, and then it all comes to a conclusion here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I guess another little detail that I want to bring up. So this scene in particular, there's this flashback and, the scene earlier where you couldn't hear Steve. It reminded me of how Patty Jenkins talked about, the inspirations for her film. I think she said, Superman the movie, Indiana Jones, and also Casablanca. Mm-hmm. I think it's sort of most obvious here. Both films have the main couple saying farewell on an airfield.
Right.
And in both cases, getting on the plane is more important than staying together. There's a sacrifice involved. Mm-hmm. I am actually trying to think which one of these characters would be Humphrey Bogart and which would be Ingrid Bergman. It kind of seems like they could each be both.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's, one of them is making a sacrifice because there's, a greater cause that's more important than the two of them being together. I actually ended up thinking about this a lot, but this isn't the Casablanca podcast, so.
I've only seen that movie once, so I know that's definitely a movie that's worth, revisiting again and again. A lot of people talk about it a lot.
Yeah, actually, just even typing up notes for this made me think, I want to watch Casablanca again. I'm sure I could find more connections, but that might be getting a bit off topic.
Mm-hmm. But no, I think you're right. That's a great point. We haven't talked about the Casablanca connections as much as we have like the Superman, the movie connections and stuff. But I think you're right. The airfield and the farewell between them is definitely a good spot to point out.
Yeah, I think this is the big thing. If it was an inspiration on the larger movie, then I guess it would just be that it's wartime, but the love story is still very important to the plot. And, it's sort of the dramatic thrust of the story. So I can see that as maybe being a major inspiration on the tone of Wonder Woman and its themes.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm gonna shift into something much more surface level and just much more kind of nitpicky. But while she has the tank above her head, and then she has the flashback with Steve, and then she decides that she's gonna spare Dr. Poison. So she throws the tank off to the side. The way that this is filmed has always stuck out to me as a little bit awkward. And I thought for a second that maybe they broke the 180 rule by having her, it looks like she's going to go throw it to one way and then she ends up throwing it the other way. I'm not sure, but I can just say as a viewer, every time I see this tank throw, it's a little bit jarring and it doesn't quite seem smooth to me.
Yeah, I can't unsee that now. It looks like she is in fact crushing Dr. Maru.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That might be it too. Dr. Maru kind of moves out of the way, but we don't clearly see where Dr. Maru ends up, and I don't think we ever see Dr. Maru again, do we?
No. We saw her run away in a previous shot before Diana actually throws the tank.
Yeah. So Dr.
Double check that, but
yeah, Dr. Maru kind of runs towards camera and off to the right, and then to me, it looks like Diana is kind of pivoting and she's going to throw the tank. From our perspective, she's going to throw it to the left. But then it cuts and she throws it to the right. And so, it always, to me, looks a little weird. It's a great move for her to throw the tank to the side, but because she throws it to the right, that is the direction that Dr. Maru just ran towards. And also, it's just not the way that I thought she was going to throw it. So that's probably enough about that. I can just say every time I watch it, that looks awkward to me. And if it wasn't there, or if it was smoother, then it would be almost like a flawless kind of final scene.
Yeah, it's just a little mistake. It is kind of cool that it does it does look like it might be an homage to, Action Comics #1.
Yeah, like while she's holding it up, and yeah, she's kind of holding it up with the two arms, and then the fact that it does go down and into the right, that is the direction that Action Comics #1 is kind of going.
It's a bit less aggressive, actually, because, I guess in Action Comics #1, Superman actually was, what was it? He was wrecking the car of some very bad men.
And he was smashing it down into the ground where she's just kind of tossing it to the side.
Yeah, it's her putting her weapon down.
Yeah.
But it's a good visual callback if it's a reference.
Yeah. So let's go into the last little sequence here, the last part where Diana does make her final choice and wins the day. So what I like about this is she doesn't say, "No, Ares, you're wrong. Let me tell you how it really is." She actually says, "You're right. They are those things that you said. They do have hatred." And by the way, I love the way that David Thewlis said the word hatred earlier in the scene. Hatred. He like really gets around those consonants and stuff. It's good.
Yeah, he's got a good bad guy voice.
But she says they are those things, but they're also so much more. So, and to me that matches the movie, because the movie has been about her moving beyond a simplistic child's sort of vision of the world to a complicated adult's vision of the world. And that matches here because she says they are actually, mankind is multiple things. They are the good and the bad together.
Right. In a way, she has a deeper understanding though, but in a way it also kind of almost becomes simple again, because it's all, it's her realizing that yes, all of these terrible things may be true, but it's still all about my decisions, about what I believe. And, I choose, like she says, and I believe in love. She chooses that despite, all the ugliness of mankind. It becomes a very simple decision. Well, that's not what I believe, or, I'm going to choose to stand up for the parts that are good.
I hadn't thought about that. That is, I'm gonna have to chew on that a little bit more, but I appreciate that perspective. Yeah,
it is, because it's a lot of people, and we're kind of getting into that now. I've talked about this being somewhat cheesy, and Patty Jenkins brings that up.
I think especially the part when she says, she kind of just rises up and says love,
Right, but it's, we're talking about like the Green Lantern Corps earlier. It's, Green Lanterns are a very popular DC character, and the main characters are powered by willpower and rage. And maybe we consider those to be less cheesy, like anger here. Anger and rage are very, we think of as logical responses to something terrible happening. The idea that you would step away from that is against your every instinct. But I think this is what Wonder Woman stands for. In a world that's so dark and grim, loving is actually more difficult. But it's, it's what makes her stronger, and it's what makes her a hero. And I guess I always thought that, it initially sounded cheesy to my ears too, but I thought, that's a good point. Especially you look at the world today, and I think people have a lot less empathy for other people. Everybody's really stressed out. Everybody's really angry because the world seems like it's going in the wrong direction. But us being angry or frustrated, it helps us, want to change things, but it alone isn't enough. You have to have compassion for people. You have to imagine that better things can happen. So, you really do. It's, like the song says, all you need is love. You don't need, if you react to everything with anger, then, things are always going to be violent and angry. And,
yeah. When I was first watching the movie, I kind of knew, as soon as I saw it, I knew that some people would just say, oh, that's cheesy, and just write it off. But for me, I'm like, well, yeah, it's cheesy, but I also actually agree with the sentiment, and I think it actually is a good idea to put forward into the world through this work of art, that is the film. I was basically like, yes, it's cheesy, but I support it. Like, I think it's good cheese.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, there's another thing. I guess if you want to do a kind of a feminist interpretation of it, Patty Jenkins mentioned in an interview that, she's not initially, when she's living on Themyscira, she doesn't want to go out into the world because, she has some darkness in her or something that needs to be avenged, kind of like Batman. She just wants to be a hero because she wants to help people. So her power and her determination comes entirely from compassion. And I guess you could say that, we never think it's cheesy if somebody is doing something for the purposes of revenge. So if you think that, stereotypically speaking, this isn't true of all things, but if stereotypically aggression is maybe more of a male emotion and empathy and nurturing is more of a feminine emotion, then maybe the reason we think of empathy and love and compassion as being kind of corny is because, we don't have, the feminine perspective portrayed in film very often. So it's kind of, I think that's the important thing about Wonder Woman. Maybe if it sounds weird to us, that's just because, we don't hear it enough. And when we do hear it, it's not portrayed as in a multifaceted way as it is in this movie.
Yeah, we've as a culture, we've seen a lot of movies where it was just grit and strength or something that like won the day at the end. Yeah, we haven't seen a lot where it's it's compassion and love that saves the day at the end.
Right.
Yeah, it might seem cheesy to some, just it's what they're saying is, this is different than what we usually see at the end of action movies, or
beating up the bad guy and getting your revenge, or getting the sick pleasure out of watching the bad guy get their comeuppance. Like, that's very satisfying, and we do kind of get it here.
Yeah.
But the idea of, being wronged but still coming out of it with like a positive outlook, that's non-intuitive, I think. That feels unsatisfying to a lot of people. So I think that's why it comes across as more cheesy, but it's really an ideal outlook.
Yeah. I mean, for me, what works and overcomes the cheese is that it was set up earlier in the movie that she's getting exposed to mankind. We see her like reacting to the smog of London, and we see her reacting to the mud at the trenches and stuff like that, and then the gassing of Veld. We see her react to all those ugly things, but we also see her making some connections and seeing some of the good side. So then to me it rings as true that she would say, I see both the good and the bad. I'm actually going to choose to be on the side of love. I had love with Steve. I have compassion for people, even if they're strangers. And so that is what's going to fuel me. So like for me, it works to overcome the cheese. But you alluded to another critique that people have for this ending, which is that if she really was going to choose love, and if she was really going to kind of rise above it and stuff and not be vengeful, then she shouldn't have killed Ares. She should have found some other way to like extend her love to include Ares. Because basically what she does is she extends her love to mankind, even though mankind has done bad things, but she kills Ares. So there is, at least at that level, there is a little bit of a contradiction there, because she still blasts, right through Ares.
Well, possibly, but, I guess the other, like, stereotypical thing about quote-unquote feminine emotions like love or empathy is that, yeah, they're emotional, they're not rational. But Diana's still practical. Like, she killed people during the no man's land scene and the sort of warehouse fight that followed it. So, she thought that those men were just under someone else's control, which means it wasn't their fault, but they were shooting at her. So they needed to be taken out. So she can have this greater love for all mankind, but Ares is an immediate and obvious danger. So, and there's no way to stop him. So she has to take him out. I'm sure if there was another way, she would prefer that. But it's a little bit like Superman killing Zod in Man of Steel. He literally had no choice.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with the taking out Ares. I mean, we don't see the dead body, I don't think. But he takes a pretty big blast right in the chest. So I'm fine with it. It's just, something where I could see it being raised as right after she professes love, she like executes somebody like right in front. But no, I think
really flashy way.
And he's already lived more than a life's worth, And also you could also just draw the distinction of he is on the God plane instead of on the actual like mortal plane. and he is guilty of murdering all these other gods. So it's kind of like, you know what? Okay, you're kind of operating on a different set of rules for Ares than you would for the rest of mankind.
Right. Well, once again, he is an immediate threat. I don't think, love and compassion doesn't mean that you can't, defend yourself, or, it doesn't mean that in extreme situations you might have to hurt others.
Yeah. And he is the one that gathered all of that lightning power and everything and said he was going to destroy Wonder Woman. So yeah, he definitely was the aggressor and tried to destroy her first, and she just sent back that same energy back at him. So that seems like fair play.
And I guess one little detail, this isn't something that's explicitly mentioned in the movie, but because the Amazons themselves are, heavily based on Greek culture, ancient Greek culture, I think it might be relevant. But I'm not an expert in this, but I've read many times that the ancient Greeks had many different words for love. So, rather than just one all-encompassing word, they had lots of different words. Like eros is sexual love, maybe kind of what we would think of as romantic love. Philos is friendly love, like what you would have towards friends and family. And agape, which I believe I'm pronouncing it right, which is just sort of like a general love for everyone. And they're all different. It's not like one is better than the others, but they all mean different things. So I kind of wish we had something like that, because, we think of as love as maybe something too big or general to be a goal in itself. And, probably another reason why it sounds kind of corny. But, Diana probably has a broader view on these things. So, her love for Steve is a similar, it's important, but it's different from a love for all mankind. And it allows for some bending of the rules here, like killing Ares for the greater good.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up the different meanings of love and stuff, because I would call it a misconception that I've heard from some people who criticize this scene or this movie. They say like, wow, she met Steve, she was with him for a few days, and now she loves Steve, and then that's like what saves the whole day and, powers her and stuff. And they will basically say something like, when she's talking about love here, it's all just about her love and passion for Steve Trevor.
Oh, no.
And I've always taken it as this kind of like playing on multiple meanings of love. Like, yeah, she did love Steve Trevor, and losing him is part of, her emotional situation right now. But I've always taken it as she's making a bigger choice about this world that she's seen and choosing the broader kind of love. And so I'm glad you brought that up. And for me, it's like, if people watch this and think it's just love for Steve Trevor, I would call that a misconception just as much as people who see BVS and the Martha scene and they think, oh, it's just about the mothers having the same name.
Right. It's just it's simplistic. It's just looking at the surface level rather than looking deeper into what these characters are feeling. So yeah, she had romantic feelings towards Steve, and she is really sad that he's dead, but he also, because he was a good person and she respected him, he was like an example of the good in all of mankind. So he helped her see the goodness in all of mankind, but that is something that it's powering her right now. Steve's already dead. But she now is fighting for all of mankind. I think he helped her open her eyes to that. But yeah, it's a greater love than just a love for one person.
Right. And Steve,
she wanted to be a hero even before Steve.
Right. And Steve even recognized that it was bigger than him, because he said, you can save the world, right? Like, so he's saying, I love you, but he realizes that her cause and her abilities go way beyond just Steve himself.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, even in Steve's case, he was thinking of the greater good. He could have stayed with Diana. She could have taken out Ares, and the war would have continued, I'm sure, because of Dr. Maru's poison. But yeah, he chose all of mankind over just Diana. Doesn't mean he didn't love her. It's just, once again, that's agape in play. That's a love for all mankind. And I think that's the message of the story. It's, saying that yeah, sure, saying I believe in love, love will save the world. That may sound cheesy, and it's a simplistic way of putting it, but it's still an idea that I think people should internalize. Just try to be kind and compassionate to others.
Mm-hmm. One final criticism that I'll just mention briefly that other people have about the scene is they'll say Diana's a hypocrite because she says that she loves mankind, but then she walks away from mankind for the next 100 years. And if you really loved mankind, you would never walk away. You would always stay active and be a hero and try to, save the day and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to just refer to Doc from Man of Steel Answers. He addressed this kind of criticism, and he just kind of points out that to love is not mutually exclusive from kind of taking a back seat or leaving in some cases. Doc would say it's possible to love and to leave, because sometimes because you love somebody, you decide I'm going to leave it to them, or I'm going to leave it to be their choice, or I'm not going to assert myself as a God figure over them because I love them. I'm going to actually let them have some kind of control over their own fate and that sort of thing.
If you love something, set it free.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that just goes to show that it's more complex than we tend to think of the emotion.
Yeah, and it wouldn't necessarily be a loving act for Diana or Wonder Woman to be like a god. Ares was kind of influencing mankind and being sort of an evil god. I'm going to influence mankind and be a positive god, but that means you're kind of, inserting yourself into the affairs of other people rather than letting them have their own choices and their own free will and stuff. So, the loving thing might be to kind of take a back seat and that sort of thing. So he's got more on that. You can check out Man of Steel Answers for sure. But let's kind of go into the last little part of the scene here where Ares pulls down some lightning bolts, kind of in an echo of his father, Zeus, and then fires those at Diana. I do like this shot where Diana's sliding backward and the lightning's hitting her. It's kind of just a nice little final bit of action here before we finish the scene. Mm-hmm. And the bracelets, it's nice with the bracelets crossed too. It's a nice iconic way to capture the lightning bolts.
It is, and also, I mean, the bit where she's walking towards him, and when she's saying the "I believe in love" thing, and she's got. It seems like she's got that like field around her, and I think at first I thought when I first saw the movie, I thought, oh, where did that come from? But looking after watching it several times, I'm just like, this is a natural progression of her powers. They've been getting stronger, and once again, since she's come to an epiphany here. It's sort of, her powers go up another level. So I think it's basically the same thing as her bracelet blast. She's absorbing the energy that's being thrown at her. Just it's a wider field. So at first I thought it came from nowhere, and then I realized, oh no, this is just a powered up version of her normal energy absorption and blasting attack.
Yeah, and I think Patty Jenkins might have commented on this where somebody was saying, like, is that a love force field that she has? But they're, like, coming at it from, like, a technical, I have to explain all the powers and how they all work kind of point of view. And Patty Jenkins sort of just, like, rejected the premise. And she's like, yeah, it's a love force field. Like, and then she kind of explains the way they approached it was we don't really base it on physically we're going to explain all of the powers. We're just doing what is emotionally right for the character and for the kind of story. And so for the story, they're like, she is choosing love, and yeah, love is just all around her. And so, yep, it is a love force field if you want to like think of it that way. But if you want a filmmaker who is very much into the like technical, physical explanations of everything that happens, Patty Jenkins is probably not your filmmaker. But if you really want somebody to follow the emotional core of the story and let the emotions develop and breathe, then I think Patty Jenkins is a great person for that.
Right. But, dear listeners, if you want, a reasonably logical explanation, because, I like logical explanations, then, yeah, kind of what I said, I feel like it makes sense. So it's the same power she's exhibited before. It's just bigger now because, she's gotten stronger, and her upgrades to her powers seem to be triggered by big emotional moments for her.
Right. Yep.
And that's been a consistent theme across the movie. So.
Yep. I accept that also. So she catches the lightning with her bracelet, which they kind of alluded to a few moments earlier. They kind of hinted, and she looks down and kind of notices, oh, my bracelets are kind of doing something interesting here. She captures all this power, and then she rises up for the big finish. And has a pretty good intense blast. Like, the special effects were pretty good on this part. The lightning looks good, and then the feeling of it kind of hitting Ares is all pretty good. And she does say the line "Goodbye, brother" too, to hint back to the demigod status of Diana and the history that they have from the beginning.
Yeah, it reminded me too of the New 52 run written by Brian Azzarello. I remember there was a line in that where she calls someone brother, and then she comments that she's never used that word before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's like, oh, wow, that was a novel experience. It's also a pretty badass thing to say right before she, destroys him. I tend to like this scene more and more the more I see it, because it's obviously a giant special effects filled third act. And, the choreography from some earlier scenes where she's fighting with her sword and shield are, those are a lot cooler from a fighting scene standpoint. But here, I think it's important to see that the kinds of powers she has, that she has godlike powers, but she uses them for good. So this is the unique way that she can fight.
Right. That's nice.
Yeah. Just like, any Amazon can fight. We've seen that at the very beginning of the movie, and Diana can fight extremely well, but this is something that only she can do.
Yes, and she is unlocking new potentials, like, well beyond what we saw, like, in the training montage at the beginning and stuff. But it's kind of nice, from start to finish, to see where she begins as a skilled fighter, to the bracelet blast, to, No Man's Land and the Veld, and then right to here, to her kind of, pinnacle that we've seen her at so far. So yeah, it's a nice power arc to go along with her, emotional growth and learning about the world and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm with you, where the, first time I saw this in theaters, I was sort of like, oh, great movie, third act lost me a little bit. But as I've watched it more and more, I've made some of these connections, that we've talked about, things that were set up before and pay off here. And I've really come to appreciate it as I watch it more and more. So
yeah.
And for me, I've also had a chance to think about some of the critiques that other people have had and think about what do I really think about it? And I'm sort of like, no, I don't really agree with any of those critiques as we kind of went through here.
Yeah. I got past the cheesiness even on the first view, because it was very earnest. And so I thought, you know what, it works here because they are very, not straightforward, just it feels honest. It doesn't feel like it's forced. It feels like, this is honestly what Patty Jenkins is trying to convey.
Yeah, it's
when
very
you really
intentional.
When you really think about it, it is an important thing, and it is an important message that Diana is spreading. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it is great to finally make connections with things. That's always a good feeling.
Well, that is our analysis of scenes 48 and 49 of Wonder Woman. Thanks so much for listening. We also want to thank Suicide Squadcast and Man of Steel Answers. And by the way, if you are a listener, we want to also let you know that you can submit your favorite part of Wonder Woman. Let us know what your favorite part is, 3 minutes or less if you can, and send that to JLUpodcast@gmail.com by September 10th.
And don't say your favorite parts to the entire movie. It's tempting, but don't.
Yeah, we'd rather hear something kind of specific, and then let us know why it's meaningful to you, so you can kind of put a little bit of your own interpretation or why it resonates with you. We'd love to hear that. Also, there's a couple days left that you can enter our giveaway for 15 free months of DC Universe, the new service. So if you've already pre-ordered DC Universe, that's fine. You can still enter our giveaway, and we will reimburse you the money. If you haven't signed up for DC Universe yet, this is a good chance to get 15 months for free. All you need to do is go to patreon.com/JLUpodcast, and anybody who becomes a patron, even $1 a month, is entered into the giveaway. If you join at the $4 a month level, then you also are entered into the giveaway, and you get access to our bonus content, like our Watchmen commentary, and we have a conversation about the future of the DCEU. So thanks for listening, and we hope to see you there at Patreon.